don't sweat it.
Today on MuscleCar, Rick and Tommy know their 4 speeds, and after this show, you will too. We'll show you how to identify, choose, and rebuild one. Plus, a 71 Torino Cobra sinks its teeth into some pavement.
Hey, welcome to MuscleCar. Today's show is all about, you guessed it, the 4-speed. Back when muscle cars ruled the streets, if you didn't have a third pedal, you were either a grandma or you had a pocket protector. If you wanted the most respect, you had 4 gears instead of 3.
Now, Mopar, Ford, and Chevy all had primary builders for their 4 speeds, and other than a few design differences, they all pretty much operate the same. And even the modern 5 and 6 speeds, they all can trace their roots right back to the good old 4-speed. Now, one other thing that all these 4 speeds have in common, they're a kick in the butt to drive. And if you're restoring an old muscle car, odds are you're going to end up with one of these. But what's the difference between them, and how do you know which one is right for you?
If you're working with a Mopar, you've got one stock option, the A833. It came in different configurations with different input shafts and tail housings depending on engine and body style. The earlier models can be identified by the cast iron case. They're a good overall performer, and rebuilt units can be found for under $1,000.
Now, Ford offered up several options. The T10 top loader is easy to identify because, as the name implies, everything loads in through the top. Now, this makes the case a whole lot stronger. Now, it was designed to replace the Borg-Warner. Now, this transmission came in 2 basic styles, either a wide ratio or a close. Now, a lot of guys think that this refers to the actual throw on the shifter, but it doesn't. What it actually refers to is the gear ratio changes between the gears. Now, say you're driving a wide ratio 4-speed. You can rack it up to about $6,000, grab second gear, but your RPMs are going to drop all the way down to, say, 2,800 to 3,000. That puts your engine below its peak horsepower. Then it has to work to get back up. If you're driving a close ratio, you rack it up to $6,000, grab second gear, it may only drop down to $4,000. That means that your engine is still in its peak horsepower. Equates out to a whole lot quicker quarter-mile times.
As for General Motors, you had several makes to choose from. Their Borg-Warner was the same as Ford's T10 that Rick was just talking about, but with a different bolt pattern for the bell housing. You could also get a Saginaw or one of several Muncies. You can always tell a Borg-Warner by the 9 bolts in the side cover, where a Saginaw and a Muncie will only have 7. And the Muncie will always have an aluminum case. So how do you know which one of these is right for you? If you're not doing a numbers matching restoration, let your wallet and how much horsepower you're dealing with decide for you. Choose a heavy duty model for your higher horse applications. Otherwise, a cheaper light duty will be just as fun to drive. You can pay a little more for a close ratio, but a wide ratio will still give you the feel of a good old 4-speed.
If you are doing a numbers matching restoration, then be sure you do your research before you lay down any coin. Now, the best way to find out if your transmission is correct is by simply tracking down the OEM part numbers. Now, Muncie's in particular can be ID'd by the casting numbers in the side case, the tail shaft housing, and the main case. Now, also don't forget to look for the date stamp and count the number of splines on your input and your output shafts, and count the number of rings on the input shaft. Now, all of these things need to match up for you to have a 100% numbers matching transmission.
The name Muncie almost always is going to come up when you're talking about 4-speeds. That's because it was GM's premier performance transmission back in the 60s and 70s. It came in 3 main types: the M20 wide ratio, the M21 close ratio, and the legendary M22 rock crusher. This extra heavy-duty close ratio chunk of metal is the most desired and the hardest to find of the Muncies. Most transmissions have helical gears, which mean they're cut in a spiral shape that reduces noise. The rock crusher can be easily identified by its straight cut gears, which generate the signature whine.
It doesn't matter if you have a rock crusher, a top loader, a Borg-Warner, or a Saginaw. The rebuild process on all of them is very similar. So after the break, we'll be knocking one apart to show you how it's done.
Hey, welcome back. If you're buying a 4-speed from a swap meet, it's a great idea to remove the side cover for inspection. I've opened up our M21 to show you what to look for. If the gears are worn or chipped or the synchros are shot, they'll have to be replaced. So just be aware of what you're buying. Some will have a magnet on the inside to collect metal shavings. If it does, check it out to see if it has any large pieces. Ours has some shavings stuck to it, which could indicate a bad bearing or a lot of miles, so it's going to get a rebuild. I'm starting by removing the front bearing retainer. The main shaft has to be shifted into second and fourth to lock it in place for the removal of the input retaining nut. The roll pin needs to be removed from the housing so the selector shaft can be pried out of the way. Next to come off is the tail housing. Use a puller to remove the Speedo drive gear, then pull off the reverse main gear. Engage fourth before removing the main shaft assembly from the case. Tap the input shaft loose with a soft hammer, then take out the reverse idler and tap out the input bearing.
Tommy, looks like you got the guts knocked out of this thing.
Yeah, pretty much. All I got to do is press out this counter shaft right now. You don't want to help, do you?
No, I can give you a hand.
Get a hold of that greasy dude.
Yeah, I just want to get me dirty too, huh?
This could be done with a hammer, but as usual, the press makes it a whole lot easier.
Here's your dirty transmission back. You know we got a parts washer over there, right?
Here, let me let you clean that up.
All right.
Now I can unload the main shaft, remove all the retaining clips, gears, and synchros that can be slid off. Next, press the main shaft out of the third gear assembly. The rear main shaft support bearing is held in place with a snap ring. Just spread the ring and tap the bearing loose. Rick got everything cleaned up nice and pretty for me so I can start putting this thing back together. Summit sent us this rebuild kit that comes with all the gaskets, needle bearings, clips, bearings, seals, and synchros so we can get it back to that like-new condition. I hope you were paying attention earlier because now you can assemble it by reversing the process I just showed you. But in case you're just tuning in, I'll go over it step by step. Install the new snap ring and bearing into the rear main shaft retainer. During reassembly, make sure to use plenty of heavy grease to prevent damage on your first ride out of the shop. Drop on third gear and the new synchro ring, then tap the synchro hub onto its spline. The fourth gear sleeve must be pressed back into place. Next, slide on second gear in the synchro and tap the hub into place. A snap ring holds everything in place. The synchro hubs each have 3 notches for the clutch keys. Use some grease to hold them in place during assembly. With the clutch keys installed, the selector sleeves can slide over the synchro hubs. Fourth gear is last on the stack, and the retaining plate falls into place with another snap ring, keeping it all together. The input shaft bearing assembly is put together piece by piece, one roller bearing at a time, then slides inside the shaft. Next comes the counter shaft assembly. After inserting the spacer, the needle bearings go in. There's a bunch of little bitty pieces here, so take your time and do it right. Use grease to hold them in place and make sure you don't leave any out or bad things will happen. With those out of the way, I can get to filling the case up, starting with the gear set, thrust washer, and counter shaft. The reverse gear rolls into place and a new thrust washer slides in. Tap the new input support bearing into the case, then slide in the input shaft. Now comes the big chunk, better known as the main gear assembly. The reverse gear shaft falls into place, followed by the reverse selector gear and speedo drive gear. The tail housing is held into place by 6 bolts that need to be torqued to specs. The reverse gear selector can slide back into its spot, and a new roll pin will keep it there. Don't forget the output shaft seal and the speedo assembly, which both go on pretty easy. Some Loctite will keep the input nut from loosening up, and don't forget to engage 2nd and 4th before tightening it down. Last but not least, the side cover can be torqued down. Rebuilding a 4-speed from a different manufacturer will be pretty similar, but if you get into a more modern 5 and 6-speed, you're going to need some specialty tools. So do your homework before cracking one open. That looks good.
Up next, there's a whole lot of shaking going on in this Ramjet Torino Cobra. Today's Flashback, a 1971 Ford Torino Cobra.
The 70s may have beaten the tar out of the muscle car, but the 71 Torino Cobra still had plenty of venom left to make its bite deadly. Watch out, because this snake is coiled up and ready to strike.
As part of Ford's mid-size line, the Torino served double duty as both a sensible family car and a radical street machine. It started off as the sporty member of the Fairlane line in '68, but by '71 the Torino had taken over and the Fairlane was given the boot. The name comes from Italy's version of Detroit, which suits the car well. Great styling matched with raw American power under the hood.
The real muscle was in the Cobra, first unleashed in '69. Came standard with a 285 horse 351, or you could pick your poison. There was the 429 Cobra Jet banging out 370 horsepower.
But to really shake things up, you could order the Super Cobra Jet with a ram air scoop and shaker hood. Capable of 375 horsepower, it ran through the quarter mile in 14.5 seconds at 102 miles an hour. Not bad for a 2-ton beast.
Like any snake, you can tell if it's dangerous by its markings. The warning signs were the blacked out hood and tail panel, not to mention a ton of badges all around. Plus it had a unique grille that wasn't split in the middle, like all the other Torinos.
Standard features also included heavy-duty suspension, dual exhaust, and a set of wide ovals with 7-inch wheels. A base model Cobra would cost you about $3,300. But this one is tricked out with lots of extras that ran the ticket up to almost $5,000.
Extras like the unusual ribbon tag, which was cool but kinda hard to read. It's also optioned with high back bucket seats, an automatic C6 transmission, mag wheels, and reflective laser stripes down both sides. A 9-inch traction lock diff with 391 gears helps shed some snakeskin.
The Cobra was one of the Blue Oval's last attempt at big cars with big muscle, tipping the scales at 3,800 pounds and measuring 206 inches in length. The Cobra, well, it's really more of an anaconda. The styling for '71 was pretty much the same as the '70 and featured the fastback sports roof that didn't come on the base models.
Only about 3,000 Cobras were sold in '71, making this one rare car. Throw in options like the Ram Air 429 and red on red look, and this is one of only a handful ever built.
It was also the last year for the second-gen Torino and the Cobra option. In '72, a brand new look was on its way, and power, it went out the window.
So if you see this Cobra slithering down the road, think twice before going near it. It ain't no garden snake.
Coming up, how modern gearboxes have improved the classic 4-speed design. You're watching MuscleCar. For a DVD copy of this episode, just go to PowerBlockTV.com and order your copy for just $5.95 plus shipping and handling. Start your own MuscleCar collection, delivered right to your door from the PowerBlock.
Hey Hey guys, welcome back. We've been talking a lot about 4-speeds today. You can have the best gearbox in the world, but it's not going to do you a bit of good if you can't control it. And that's where a shifter comes in. It's basically a lever that pushes on the rods to control the gears. But there's more to it than that. A performance shifter is going to have a shorter throw, a more precise pattern, and that's going to equate out to quicker shifts and less jamming. Now, upgrading was a must to be competitive, and Hurst shifters like this have found their way into a lot of muscle cars for that very reason. Now, all standard transmissions have some kind of linkage to control the gears. Now, some are external, like our Muncie, but others, like our late model T56 6-speed, well, it's all internal. Now, the main reason for going to an internal design is size. 2 more gears means an extra rod and a bigger shifter, and there's just flat not enough room for all this hanging off the side. So they took the shifter, moved it to the top, ran all the linkage internally. A stronger input shaft is another feature on later model transmissions. They use higher quality materials and a higher spline count. Now, the larger splines on the 4-speed may look stronger, but they're not. The higher spline count means more contact area, which means it can handle a lot more torque. But hey, let's be honest, the biggest advantage of swapping out a 4-speed to a 5 or a 6-speed is the overdrive. I mean, the best you can hope for with a 4-speed is a final drive ratio of maybe 1-to-1, whereas with a 6-speed, you can get a double overdrive, and that means less engine wear and better gas mileage. Plus, you can run a set of 456s out back if you're going to build a boulevard bruiser and still cruise down the freeway at 70 miles an hour, no problem. Hey, that's the best of both worlds.
All you automatic guys may be feeling a little left out, but if you want to join in the 3-pedal fun, there's a lot of companies out there offering conversion kits.
And that means you can drop in a 4, 5, or 6-speed into just about any muscle car. But all you Slushbox fans out there, don't sweat it, because we'll be getting a lot more in depth into autos later on. But for this week, we're out of time. So until next time, we're out of here.